The island of Okinawa was supposed to be the last step before victory. Instead, it became a nightmare so horrifying that it convinced America to unleash the deadliest weapon ever created. By the spring of 1945, the war in the Pacific had turned into a bloody grind. The United States had captured island after island, Guadalcanal, Saipan, Iwo Jima, each one closer to Japan's home shores. But every mile came at a higher cost. The Japanese refused to surrender. They fought to the death, often preferring suicide over capture. Okinawa was different. It wasn't just another small island in the Pacific. It was the last barrier before Japan itself, only 400 miles from the mainland. Whoever controlled Okinawa could control the skies and seas around Japan. It would be the perfect staging ground for the planned invasion of the Japanese home islands, Operation Downfall. The Americans expected a tough fight. They had no idea they were about to face hell. When the US fleet arrived in late March 1945, Okinawa looked peaceful from a distance. Green hills, sugarcane fields, villages scattered along the coast. But underground, the Japanese had transformed the island into a fortress. More than 100,000 soldiers waited in tunnels, caves, and concrete bunkers, commanded by one of Japan's most disciplined officers, General Mitsuru Ushijima. His plan wasn't to defend the beaches, it was to bleed the Americans dry once they came ashore. On April 1st, 1945, Easter Sunday, American forces landed. It was the largest amphibious assault of the Pacific War. 180,000 men stormed the beaches under the cover of battleships and bombers. At first, there was silence. No gunfire, no resistance. The troops moved inland, confused. Some even joked that maybe Japan had given up. They hadn't. They were waiting. As the Americans advanced south toward the Shuri Line, a maze of hills, caves, and ridges, the trap snapped shut. Japanese artillery, mortars, and machine guns erupted from hidden positions. The battle turned into a nightmare of mud, rain, and relentless death. The fighting was so close that soldiers could smell each other's sweat. Flamethrowers were used to clear caves. Tanks fired point-blank into cliffs. Whole platoons disappeared into the fog of gunfire. Civilians were trapped in the middle. Okinawa was home to more than 300,000 people, and they suffered the most. Many were caught between the two armies. Japanese propaganda had told them that Americans would torture or kill them if captured. Terrified families jumped off cliffs or hid in caves where grenades and fire consumed them. The island became a slaughterhouse. From the air, the battle looked even worse. Japanese pilots began launching kamikaze attacks in massive waves, more than 1,900 suicide planes over the course of the campaign. They crashed into US ships with terrifying precision. Destroyers, cruisers, even aircraft carriers were torn apart. On some days, the sky itself seemed to be falling. The US Navy suffered its highest losses of the war at Okinawa. 36 ships sunk, 368 damaged, almost 5,000 sailors killed, many burned alive or blown into the sea. American commanders watched in disbelief as young Japanese pilots turned themselves into human missiles, screaming prayers as they dove. The ground battle was just as brutal. The Japanese used every inch of terrain to their advantage. Each hill became a fortress, each cave a death trap. To take a single ridge could cost hundreds of men. The mud never dried. The smell of death never left. Rain mixed with blood, turning the ground into red rivers. By May, the Americans had been fighting for over a month. Progress was measured in yards. The constant bombardment, the close combat, and the suicide charges wore everyone down. General Simon Buckner, the US commander, described it as fighting the earth itself. He was right. Okinawa wasn't a battle. It was an endurance test against an enemy that refused to die. And still, the Japanese refused to surrender. They knew the battle was lost. They were running out of food, ammunition, and water. But they fought on anyway, determined to die for the emperor. When their positions were overrun, some soldiers blew themselves up with grenades, others charged with bayonets. Entire units vanished into suicide attacks. By June, the American soldiers were hollow-eyed, exhausted, and traumatized. After 2.5 months of combat, they had seen things no human being should ever see. And still, the Japanese fought. When General Ushijima realized it was over, he refused to surrender. He and his chief of staff performed ritual suicide rather than face capture. Their final message to Tokyo read, "We fought bravely and honorably to the end." When it was finally over, Okinawa was destroyed. The green hills had been blasted into moonscapes of mud and bone. The air reeked of smoke and decay. Out of 100,000 Japanese soldiers, fewer than 10,000 were captured alive. Over 12,000 Americans were dead and 36,000 wounded. But the true horror was among the civilians. Up to 150,000 Okinawans killed, nearly half the island's population. For the Americans, it was victory. But it was a victory that came with a warning. When reports from Okinawa reached Washington, President Truman and his advisors saw what invading Japan would mean. If one small island could cost over 200,000 lives in total, what would happen when US forces landed on Japan's mainland, where millions more soldiers and civilians would fight to the death? Military planners estimated the invasion could cost 1 million American casualties and perhaps 10 million Japanese dead. Every cave, every city, every home could become another Okinawa. Japan showed no signs of surrendering. Its leaders were preparing school children to fight with bamboo spears. Propaganda told civilians that dying for the emperor was better than living in defeat. To the Americans, it seemed the only way to end the war quickly was to use the new weapon they had been secretly developing, the atomic bomb. The decision didn't come from nowhere. It was forged in the fire of Okinawa. The shock, the exhaustion, the fear of repeating that kind of carnage on a much larger scale convinced Truman that he couldn't risk another invasion. When he authorized the use of the bomb in July 1945, he did so with Okinawa's numbers in front of him. 12,000 Americans dead on a single island, 100,000 Japanese soldiers gone, 150,000 civilians lost in the crossfire. It was the most horrifying battle of the Pacific, and a glimpse of what the invasion of Japan would look like, multiplied 100 times. When Hiroshima and Nagasaki were destroyed in August, many of the men who had fought at Okinawa understood exactly why. To them, it wasn't just about ending the war, it was about ending the endless cycle of slaughter. But even they carried guilt. Some wondered if anything justified that much destruction. Others believed the bomb had saved millions of lives by avoiding a second Okinawa on every Japanese island. The truth was, no one came out clean. Okinawa had burned that kind of clarity away. In the years after the war, survivors described it as a place where humanity vanished. Soldiers remembered fighting among the dead for days without sleep. Civilians recalled mothers throwing themselves from cliffs to escape the madness. Even Japanese officers admitted the battle broke their faith. For America, Okinawa became the proof that Japan would never surrender through conventional means. For Japan, it became a symbol of sacrifice and tragedy, a preview of what could have happened if the atomic bombs hadn't ended the war. In the ruins of Okinawa, the world saw what total war really meant. The sky filled with suicide planes, the seas burned with wreckage, the earth shook under endless bombardment, and when it was over, nothing was left but silence and the decision that would change history forever. Because after Okinawa, America didn't just want to win, it wanted the killing to stop, at any cost.